Hey everybody, this is Zach Huber. Um, I'm going to talk about Lab 6, so conditional and iterative control structures. Um, so most of this lab will just be about while loops. Um, in this lab we expect you to get familiar with while loops, and here is a list showing what you need to learn. You'll need to learn how to form correct Boolean expressions to control the loops, using counter-controlled while loops, using event-controlled while loops, and using end-of-file loops. So to start things off first, um, I just click that while loop button. We will examine how Boolean expressions can be used in a while statement. A while statement makes a program repeat a statement or group of statements. Such repetitions are called loops, and this webpage it should help you to master different types of while loops here. So we're just going to talk about three different types. We have the while loop, a count controlled loop, and an event controlled loop. So with the while loop, the syntax goes like this. We have that while keyword, and then we have that the expression that we're going to check. And so if this expression is true, this statement here will be executed. And with a while loop, the reason we call it a loop is because after it checks the first time and executes the statement, it will go back up here, it'll go back up to the top, and then check this expression again. And so if this is true the second time, the statement here will it will be executed again. So it will just loop and continue forever, basically, until this expression is false. So that's basically what a loop does. It will continue executing a statement as long as the value of the Boolean expression is true, basically. And if it's false, it will just stop. So with a count-controlled while loop, let's say we have this code here. We have sum equal to 0, count equal to 1, and then we say while count is less than or equal to 10. We want to do this stuff here. So we enter a value, and then we add that value to the sum, and then we increment the count here. And so this part is really important here. This variable here, count, that's our counter variable, and so this is what we're keeping track of in our expression. So every time we loop here, we're checking is the count less than or equal to 10, and then every time this executes, we update it. So we add 1 to the count. So when we start at first, it will be 1, so 1 less than or equal to 10. Then we add 1, so we go back up. Now it should be 2, and so is 2 less than or equal to 10? Yeah, that's true. So we do this again. We add 1 all the way until count is 10. And then once count is 10, we execute this one more time. Since 10 is less than or equal to 10, we add 1, and then we go back up, and then we check is 11 less than or equal to 10? No, so this is false, and then we skip this, and then we go down here. And so we print the sum of the 10 numbers that we entered. And so that's basically how a count-controlled while loop will work. We have a count, or like a counter variable, in our expression, and we must update the counter sometime in our statement that we execute here. If we never update the count, then this will just loop forever, if this is true. If this is false, we will just never execute this. Yeah. So an event-controlled loop is similar. this kind of loop is one whose execution is controlled by the occurrence of an event within a loop itself. If we look at this example, we have an event-controlled loop that reads the sum of values from Cin until a negative value is encountered. So we have sum equals 0. We enter a value here, Cin. So if this value, is greater than or equal to 0, so if it's like positive, the sum equals the sum plus the value. We say enter a value again, and then we enter a value. And so this will continue forever until we enter a value that is less than 0 here. So this will loop, it'll loop, 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 loop. We enter 1, it'll loop. If we enter like -5, this will stop. Yeah, so for the same problem, we can write the program in another way as well. We could say if the value is greater than or equal to 0, more data is true, else more data is false. And then we have the same thing, but we're just checking, instead of checking this expression here, what we're doing is we're saying the result of that expression here. We're just saying more data equals whatever that, basically, whatever that means. So we're checking more data, and if the value is greater than or equal to 0, we say more data is true, else more data is false. So that's just another way to write the same thing, basically. So the above while loop is also called a flag-controlled loop. The variable more data is the flag, and it has the equivalent effect as the following here. So we have more data equals to value greater than or equal to 0, and we're just checking more data. So that's basically the same code as before, again, just written in a different way. And here, more data, that is the flag that controls the while loop here. So we're checking the flag, which is basically this. For proper loop operation, there's like 3 main steps that you should always follow. So for step 1, the variables in the expression, the counter or the event, must be set or initialized before the while loop statement is executed the first time. So you just want to make sure that they have some sort of value before you're checking the value. For step 2, the expression must test the counter or the event correctly so that the body of the loop executes when it is supposed to and terminates at the proper time. So you want to make sure the loop is looping when it's supposed to, and it's not looping when it's supposed to. For step 3, the counter or the status of the event must be updated within the loop. So if the counter or the status of the event is not updated, the loop never stops executing. And this situation is called an infinite loop. So if the loop is looping forever and it's not stopping, that's an infinite loop, and that's almost always a bad thing. So you usually never want an infinite loop here. Yeah, so just keep these 3 in mind when you're setting up loops. Next, we'll talk about end of file and nested loops as well. So an end of file loop, basically what that does is it just checks the state of an input stream. So we know any of the following can cause an input stream to enter the fail state: invalid input data, an event to read beyond the end of the file, or an attempt to open a non-existent file to input. So to test the state of a stream, the stream name can be used in an expression, and the expression returns true if the state is okay, and a false value if the state is in the fail state. And so C++ provides a way to test the state of a stream. The stream name used in the expression returns true if the value is okay, and false if the state is in a fail state. I think this just repeated itself. Yeah, that just repeated itself. Okay. So when the test expression returns a false value, the program terminates. When it returns a true value, the program continues reading the data item from the file. And here's a sample program just to basically show how you would use an end of file loop. So here we have indata.open. We're going to open input.txt, and we're going to check if not in data. So if in data failed, then we're going to say we can't open the input file successfully. Otherwise, we just skip all that stuff, and then we're going to open up output.txt without data, and then we're going to check here, we're going to check if not out data. So if we can't open, so if out data fails, then we can't open the output file again. And so basically what we're going to do is we're just going to read a value into indata. So we're going to use indata to read a value while in data. So while in data succeeded, we add the value to the ongoing sum, we increment counts, and we read another value within data. And this will continue as long as we can read, or as long as in data succeeds in reading a value here. So this will just go on until the end of the file. And so if the count is less than or equal, if the count is not equal to 0, then we calculate an average, else we say the average is 0, and then we just output the sum and the average here. So I'll show you an example here. In my input file, I have 2.2, 1.1, and 3.3. If I run the program, and it should just have like no message. And if you get this window, just click yes. It wants to update your output file. So if I look at my output.txt, this should be the sum, and this should be the average here. So all these sum together is 6.6, and these the average is 2.2. So that's what the program does basically. Yeah. One other thing to mention is you can have your input data set up like this, like on each line, just line by line, or you could have spaces in between. So that works as well. And now for nested loops. So I think before we talked about nested if statements. This is basically the same thing. So a loop inside of another loop is a nested loop, basically. So we have while loops, do while loops, and for loops. Any loop inside of another loop is called a nested loop. Here we have basically a program with an example of a nested loop here. So we have this while loop here, and we have another while loop inside of that. So this will loop, it'll loop, 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 and then when this loop stops, it will continue executing the code in this in the outer loop. So this here's the inner loop, and this is the outer loop here. Yeah, and this will continue to loop, and then once we reach here, this will loop again each time this outer loop loops. that's basically it for nested loops. So now for the exercises, for number 1, you want to get a copy of the program count.cpp. So you can just press Control A, Control C, go to your projects, and then Control V to paste it. Basically what you'll be doing for this, this exercise is you're going to look at the comments here, and you're just going to follow the instructions. So you're going to add an int declaration statement here for the loop counter. So you're just going to, what this means here, an int declaration, is you're just going to declare an integer for the loop counter. So like we did with the sum, we declared an integer called sum. Here you'll just declare an integer for the loop counter. And the rest of the instructions are pretty self-explanatory. So make sure you follow those. And then once you've done that, in order to test it, you should test it with these values here. So you'll set the loop total to 5, and then you'll add 3, -2, 0, 9, and 1. So your sample output, it should look like this. It should prompt you to enter the numbers. You say 5, and then you enter these, and then at the end you should get 11. For number 2, you want to get a copy of iodemo.cpp, and this file uses IO to read 4 floating values from the data file input file.txt, and it writes the sum and the average of the output file.txt. So your assignment is to add code to the while loop, to input a number, add it to the sum, and increment the counter. So for this one, this is exercise 2. Exercise 2, you can just get a copy of here. Yeah, and you'll just update, you'll just modify the code, basically. Yeah. And then you'll complete the program according to the comments here. So if you look, there should be some comments. Yeah, you'll complete this loop body. You'll add a newly read value to the variable sum, increment the counter for count, and you'll read a value from the file into the variable val. For number 3, the purpose of this program is to demonstrate how to use a nested loop. For this one, you'll get a copy of linect.cpp, or that's line count here. So what this will do is it will just count the number of lines in a file. So you'll complete this according to the comments. Here it says, please place a while statement here, and you'll add more code to complete the program. Yeah, so basically at the end it should just tell you how many lines are in the program. For number 4, this is like a scenario. For your birthday, you received a $10 gift certificate for an online music store. You can buy songs until your money is gone. And so you're going to write a program from scratch that allows the user to repeatedly buy songs from an online music store, and your initial balance will be 10. Just to make it simple, any input will be valid, so you don't have to check if the input is correct, but just enter 0.99, 1.99, or 2.99, and you'll ignore like a song name or artist name. You'll exit the loop when the user does not have enough money to buy any more songs. So if you look at the cheapest song option is 99 cents, you'll exit the loop when the user can't afford 99 cents, basically. And when you're done at the loop, when the loop is over, you'll display the remaining balance and make sure that negative balances are not allowed. So you want to check to see if you can afford it before you subtract it. And your output should look like this. You should enter the cost for your song and then print your remaining balance. And if you have, we have $2.04. If we enter 2.99, it should say your choice is too expensive, choose another one please. And it should continue until we have less than that value. And at the very end it should say, sorry, your balance is this, you cannot buy any more songs. Yeah, so we assume that the user will enter the price correctly, and you don't need to check that the price is one of the three here. So you don't need to check if the input is correct. That should be it for Lab 6. If you have any questions, feel free to email me or one of the other lab instructors here for help.